Thursday, we are looking at our continued study and our trek through the book of Revelation. We're in chapter 6. In the last few days, we've been talking about some of the sevens that are in the center part of Revelation and the prophecies. And then today we are going to be talking about specifically the four horsemen that are talked about in Revelation. And we have talked about the scroll that was given and how the Lamb was the only one who could open it. So let's read the beginning of Revelation chapter 6 and see what the four horsemen really are. I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the seven seals. Then I heard one of the four living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked up, and there before me was a white horse. Its riders held a bow, and he was given the crown, and he rode out to conquer like a conqueror bent on conquest. When the Lamb had opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." Then another horseman came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given the power to take peace from the earth, to make men slay one another. To him was given a large sword. And then, when the Lamb had opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a black horse, its rider holding a pair of scales in his hands. Then I heard what sounded like a voice coming out from amongst the living creatures. A quart of wheat for a day's wages, 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages. Do not damage the oil and the wine. When the Lamb had opened the fourth seal, I heard the fourth living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was the pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given the power over a fourth of the earth to kill by sword, famine, plague, and by wild beast of the earth. Well, we're going to pick up and read about the other of these seals tomorrow. But today I want us to focus on the four horsemen. First and foremost, there are differing views, as we always say, about the four horsemen. We have the white horse, the fiery red horse, the black horse, and the pale horse, the pale rider upon the pale horse. Now, I want us to understand, first of all, we have to be looking at the fact that God is allowing wrath to be poured out on the earth. And how we view this, whether it's a view of the church age on, whether it's a view of the last days, whether it's a view of what's building up, we have to keep in mind what's happening here. Because there's some that look at this and they see this white horse, especially when it's coming out, and they look at it and they say, wait a minute. Jesus is coming as the conqueror. He's going to ride a white horse. And later on in Revelation, it will say that he'll come on his, steed basically, and it's a conquering hero scenario. We know in the New Testament times when Jesus was crucified that most generally when the Romans came into town and they conquered an area, the general who was in charge would ride in on a white horse at the end of everything and kind of come in as this conquering hero. But Jesus didn't come that way. Not his first time. He came as the servant king. He died in our place. He came as a sacrifice. And I say this very intently because a lot of times people look at this white horse and say, this must be Christ coming. And I want us to see here what it says. He rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest, and he was given a crown. And so I can see the confusion that gets there. But really, I think instead of seeing this as the Christ, we need to see this as the Antichrist. It's a false Christ. It's a false hope, if you will, pretending to be the real deal. Knowing that everybody's looking for a white horse, they're going to turn to whoever has the answers. That's what happens with antichrists throughout history. That's what happens to the final antichrist. They're going to put their hope and their faith into whoever is going to save them from the calamity that is there, and they're going to be hailed the conquering hero. They're going to be given the crowns by humanity because they are saving us. But in truth, they're enslaving people. And if you take the whole story, and look at the sevens and you look at the tribulation period and the 3.5 years, everything switches. They come in as this hope for everybody. And then at the end of the 3.5 years, everything changes and they're not the hope anymore. So it's not Christ. It's a release of wrath upon the earth. So it has to be a release of evil. And therefore, that evil is a false Christ, a false hope, if you will, for the world. So that's the white horse. What about the next one? It's the fiery horse. The fiery horse represents war and death and hatred. And we see throughout history, war and death and hatred are mentioned. As I was taking notes for this, Jesus, even back in his warnings, and we went through some of this back in Matthew when we were talking about some of the warnings of the end times coming right from Jesus's words. He reminded people that there were going to be wars and rumors of wars that were coming upon the earth. And that's because people have fought one another and they're going to continue to fight one another up until the end. And when everybody comes to peace under that first Antichrist that's mentioned there, under the white horse, that's when people really should take note, because throughout history there's wars and rumors of wars. And so this angel of war, if you will, that's represented by this horse, is the one that's allowing that attitude of hatred amongst men to spew out and pour out. And it has been going on since the beginning of time, and it will continue until God puts an end to it. Why is God pouring this out? Because humanity has sinned, and humanity's living in sin so much that God is pouring out wrath, pouring out evil to let it do its full fruition. Then we see the black horse with the scales. The black horse with the scales, some people say, well, this is about weighing and measuring the hearts of men. And it's not about weighing and measuring the hearts of men. Back in the day of John, and then in this time, you weighed on scales prices. You would put on one side of the scale, you'd put some grain, and on the other side, you put some coins. And basically, that's what all this has to do with, because if you look at what it says in the passage, a quart of wheat for a day's wages, 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages. In other words, it's barely enough to keep you alive, but guess what? It's saying the price of things is going to get so high, and it's going to this is the economic disasters coming. Now, there's been economic disasters before. There have been economic disasters throughout history. And as I was looking at this and thinking, I really believe that this black horse and the weighing of expenses is really telling us that there's a weighing of the cost of commerce and a weighing of the cost of how there is injusticely done property. We talked or an injustice towards our properties. Now, I'm not going to go out there and tell you that I'm one of these people who believes that, a lot of people do today, that, we need to go socialistic. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying throughout history, sometimes people mistreat others by holding them economically down. James warned of this when he said, why do you rich people, barely pay a day's wages to your people? We talked about that when we went through the study of James. I'd encourage you to go back and look at James 5 in our study in that if you didn't hear it then. And we're talking about, this is the kind of thing that's happening. Cost is going to get so high. People are going to try to make a day's wages just to get some bread, a day's wages just to survive. You can think of the Great Depression in such a bad way. That's what it was like. And it's going to be like this again, because this is what happens when evil is released upon the earth, when people are unjustly treating one another. And finally, we have this last horse, the pale rider. The pale rider of death, if you will, followed by Hades. Hades is not hell, not in the modern sense. So most people think of hell as the place that the devil is going to be thrown into, and also the evil of the world is going to be burned up in hell. That is the lake of fire at the end of time. It doesn't say that's hell. That's a different word. Hell comes from the word Hades, which is just a place of death, a place of holding. And if you look at this, who is it that it's referring to? A quarter of the earth in time will be killed by all kinds of things, from war to natural disasters to animals and other things. And that's really all it's about, is the release of death upon the world. So our four horsemen: Antichrist, the angel releasing war and hatred, the release of injustice and economic strife, and finally, the fourth horseman is death itself. These are the four things that will be poured out on humanity, and the four things that humanity has been going through since the beginning of time. Just as Jesus said, there will be rumors of wars and wars to come, and you'll know that it's not here yet, but it is still coming. As you know all of this, the only sure thing we can hope for in everything is that our faith in Christ is all that's going to save us and it's going to keep us till the end. I hope that you grasp that and that God blesses you on your journey today.
That's today's Devo on Deep Treks. No matter how deep the questions or dark the doubts, there's always a path forward. Reach out at deeptreks.com with prayer needs or topics you'd like us to explore. Keep trekking. Renewal is never far away. Be blessed on the journey and bless others along the way.